kind of off the reservation, but have you had any discussions with Tony Bennett at Virginia?
I talked to him the night we got beat.
Really?
And talked to him, but we texted each other. So
And what was,
misery loves company, right?
Yeah.
So no, just obviously he experienced that, but what stood out to me was more of what he just went through. They had just gotten beat by Furman
oh yeah.
on a real tough play, where they were in control of the game. They were late and had a costly turnover, and it was tough. So for him to think about us when it happens to you, it's a pretty big hole in your stomach because you work so hard to get yourself in great positions, and then but there is another team out there. But yeah, we've definitely discussed things.
He reached out to you
Yeah, he reached out to me.
right after the game.
Yeah, he said hide the sharp objects. He didn't say that. But it'd make for a good story.
Did you have to though?
Yeah, at times, like you just, because you spend so much time, just preparing and getting yourself ready and going through things. And obviously we've been in that position before and had success, and we've been in that position before and not had success. And so like all those experiences weigh on you. So you just try to do everything in your power to prepare your team. So when you have a loss like that, it's really hard. It's really hard to go through. It's hard for your players. It's hard for everybody because you put so much into it.
How did you deal with it?
Nothing. You just got to sit in it. You obviously watch. You obviously, kind of soul search. What you bring out of it is you figure out who's really behind you, and then you figure out that you've done some really good things. Because what it'll get you to do is think you got to change a lot, when in reality you don't. You know what I mean? Because we're doing some really good things, within our conference. We're doing some really good things non-conference. We've had success in the NCAA tournament, getting to the Sweet 16s, multiple ones in Elite 8s, but we haven't got over that hump. But when you have teams that can make those moves, and then you have those losses, man, it's really hard to take. So, you got to separate the emotion from really factual information that can help your team. Now, if you're changing your team, now you got to dive into that element. You know what I mean? We're not changing our team. We have a lot of the pieces back from last year, so it makes you feel good about it, but it also makes your guys feel good once you kind of go through it. I think that's the piece of it. It's an exercise in pain, but also you're hoping it's going to be an exercise of happiness at the end of the day.
The pieces you have added with Miles, with Lance, and then obviously with Cam,
Right.
Guys like that, do you feel like those are the missing pieces you didn't have last year that can help you do some different things?
Yeah, well, we were we weren't short on substance or ability. We were short on athleticism and quickness, but we had the right people. I think sometimes that gets lost because now you'll go and get those physical attributes, but then you won't have the same people. So like I've always kind of recruited that way, especially in the last 9-10 years, is make sure you have the right guy. And I think you see that with us having the fewest amount of transfers in and out of any high major in the country. It's because people want to get their education here. People made a good decision in terms of processing things. Like you should bump heads in recruiting with the same people that are like you. So when you recruit somebody and they have 4 or 5 different people, they really don't have a standard of what they're doing, and we probably should get out of that. Because it's not a talent game, it's a production game. But you have to have size, you have to have quickness, you have to have athleticism, you have to have skill. So you have to have, those attributes to really put your team together. But if you don't have the makeup and the substance from the people, normally those teams crumble.
Look, pretty big step made defensively last season. What's the next frontier there? Where can you go?
Who's that? Our team?
You, Purdue.
Oh, Purdue. Okay. Yeah, we had more talent from athleticism the year before. We didn't have a great one to do on that end. I thought last year our guys did a great job. We were one of the best offensive teams in the country against the top 100 in the country. I think we were the #1 efficient offensive team against everybody. We ended up being 12, which makes no sense, right? Makes absolutely no sense. But that's what we did. I thought we made big jump. Like we were in the 80s the previous year, and we ended up like 22 or 23. But we ended up 14 against the top 100. Once again, it makes no sense, right? We're better against better competition. But that's just I thought our guys really worked hard at it. I thought we did a lot of good things on that end. And I thought Zach got better as a defender. You know, I thought his ball screen defense was better. I thought his post defense was better. We're the #1 team in the country in fewest fouls. So, and we got fouled a lot. So we're the #1 country also, team in the country in free throw disparity. So we committed the fewest amount of fouls and we got fouled a lot. So you're stealing a lot of points there on the free throw line. So that's something for us that can't change. You know, we have to keep doing that. And when you do things of that nature and you do positive things offensively, it helps you defensively. And so where we get into a problem is when we turn the basketball over and we shoot a high volume of threes with a low percentage, like we struggle no matter what the scenario is. And like that's what you got to try to minimize. But everybody struggles in that, you know. When you say someone had a bad game, you go look at a box score, you normally stare at something. You normally stare at turnovers. You normally stare at a lack of rebounding, you know, and things of that nature. Because you lose that possession battle and you turn the basketball over a lot, you're going to be in trouble.
Seemed like ball pressure would be an emphasis this year.
You know, we don't turn people over very much. And so if you're going to be average to above average and taking care of the basketball, and then you're poor in forcing turnovers, which we were, like now you're not getting as many possessions as you want, even though where we get our possessions is on the offensive glass. We get a lot of offensive rebounds. So, but if you take care of the ball and you get offensive rebounds, you know, you're really going to help yourself. Then you start forcing turnovers. So I don't think we're going to be, we have some guys like Miles and Cam that he mentioned, you know, that give us that length on the wing. We just got to be more active. We got to be more active with our hands without getting out of defensive position, because we have to be able to turn people over at times.
Matt, it's been your, you talked about living in it after last year.
Yeah.
What's been your approach with the players on that? Because the honest approach is, you know,
Right.
what happened.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't let that ghost out of the closet too much in the coming season, though.
Right.
How do you kind of handle that dynamic with them?
Yeah, well, a lot of times when people say things and they get bogged into it, like you got to look at the validity of it. Like it's true. Like, you know what I mean? I think you got to get over that hurdle first. Like you want to like dismiss everything and push everything to the side, but that's not the case. Like we got beat by St. Peter's in the Sweet 16. You know, we got beat by Farley Dickinson in the first round. Like, you know, sit in it, but don't run from anything. You know, you always face things. I think when you face things, it's harder, but that's, you know, what kind of brings the demons out and really helps you, because now you have a little bit more drive. Now you're a little bit more focused. Just the more attention to detail than anything. So we discussed it when we got back. We took a bus trip back and just talked about all the great things that we did last year. But that happened. When we got back in the summer, we met and we talked about it. Like when we got here in the fall, like we discussed it. I don't think it's anything that we're going to put away. We'll get asked about it a lot. So I think you guys will do your part in making sure we keep talking about it. But it is a storyline. Like sometimes, like you guys search out a narrative that really isn't there. It'd make for a good story if it was true, but you're trying a little bit too hard. Well, this is here and it's true. And so like, you know, use it as motivation, but be honest about things. Like as a coach, you're always trying to help your players, but you can fix yourself a lot better than you can fix somebody else. So that's what I always talk about. Like when we're messed up, like make sure I'm fixing like what I'm seeing and what I'm doing, because a lot of times you do things that you know wins in this league, but it might not be the best for your personnel. So like people don't know how to like sometimes adjust to somebody like Zach. Like it's a hard adjustment because they can't have him in practice. So like now if you can't get to where you adjust to him, like we're not going to go away from that. Like we're going to stay with that. But then sometimes there's difficulties there for us where we got more, you know, we got a lot more weapons too. So I think the balance will really help us. You know, I think Trey Kaufman-Ren's improvement, Braden Smith and Fletcher Lawyer going into their sophomore years, and just finding, because every one of those guys can shoot, but just kind of finding that collection of individuals that are going to play and shoot with confidence, because we collectively kind of lost our confidence at the end of the year. Even though we won 5 games in a row before we got beat, we still were, if you go look at our percentages, they weren't very good. But we played hard, and in a couple of those games, we just didn't turn the ball over. You know, if we don't turn it over, and even if we do shoot a low percentage, we're a pretty good offensive rebounding team. We're going to keep coming at you and getting those possessions.
Now, about Trey Kaufman-Renn, you talked a little bit over the offseason about playing him with Zach.
Mm-hmm.
How does that fit into the things you've been talking about with, you know, defense and obviously he rebounds and quickness and athleticism?
Yeah, well, I think the other 2 guys have done a really good job for us, first of all. Like Mason Gillis and Caleb First have been really good players for us. But at the end of the year, and this is where you go back and evaluate, if we don't foul at the end of those 2 games, like we're holding people in the 50s. Like that should be enough, to win a basketball game, right? Especially when you have one of the better offensive teams in the country, but yet it wasn't. And so like to me, it's like, here's a guy that can really score the basketball and I'm playing him 10 to 12 minutes. And so like, even though there might be other people on your team that defend better, can you put somebody out there that can just simply get baskets for you, especially in those kind of situations? So just looking to try to, amp up what we're trying to do offensively. I think he's a great rebounder. I think he's a really good low post player. He can play on the perimeter. He can dribble into post moves. So I think he really, benefited. He led us in scoring on our trip. But Zach also wasn't there. But we've played him, and we'll play him about a third of the time in practice, at that position, because I think it gives us that weapon. But we're also not going to neglect the other 2 guys and their strengths. So, but he definitely will have more of a role in our team. He's really done well.
What were the conversations like about Zach coming back when you were talking to him just kind of through the process?
Yeah, well, I didn't talk to him a lot through it. I always back up in those situations because I think it's important. I think it's hard for people to understand, especially people that root for your team, that you just want what's best for them. Because you look at it when you play college basketball, and I wasn't a very good player, you'd love to be in that position, right? So you just want him to fulfill his dream. One of the things that really jumped out was he was going to get drafted. He was going to probably get a minimum contract, but he'd spend a lot of time in the G League, which a lot of young guys do. He needs to play basketball games. This is his 7th year of organized basketball. He needs to play. And so where is he going to make the most improvement? Well, you could argue he is the best player in the country last year, but you could argue he's the most improved player too, right? I think that's a pretty good argument. So why would you want to take him out of the environment where he improved and take him to that environment, which he could improve there too, right? But, why risk that? And I don't think he's done being a kid either. He really enjoys it. I know he missed going on our trip because he's with the Canadian national team, but I think he really wanted to be with us also. And but no, I just tried to gather facts and kind of where he was going to land and where he would be. And so,
This was just kind of a load management day for him after his busy summer.
he got a concussion. He got hit the other day, so he's out.
Same as last year.
Huh?
Same as last year.
Yeah, they said, shows you how much I know. Like they said that, and I forgot that happened last year. So
Matt, do you remember what you were doing, where you were when Zach decided to come back?
When we talked about it, I was in my kitchen. As you can see, I get a lot done in my kitchen. Yeah, but I knew it was going to be close. He went to a handful of NBA places and worked out. He's going to have to break down a wall. And that's with his hard work and with this season. I think he can do that. But he has to. When there's not a bucket for you to go into, it's like selling a house. You go sell a house, you go grab 5 comps, right? And you get the price value of all 5 of those comps, and then okay, I get the same square foot, I get the same yard, I get the same. This is the price. Well, who's his comps in the NBA right now? Like all of his comps are people that are, our age, right?
Right.
Yeah, and they're 50s and 60s and 70s, and so but there's a really good basketball player in there. He's like really athletic and can really move and do some things, but it's also for his size, right? You got to throw that prepositional phrase in there. So he's just got to keep working. A lot of people want to just put it towards like shooting on the perimeter and things of that nature. It's really being functional in how they play. It's no different than college basketball is different than the NBA. FIBA basketball is different than the NBA. So you see that competition a lot. Everybody always tries to clump it in, and obviously there's more similarities than differences, but there is those differences, and that's what he's different. So he's just got to keep working. I know rebounds per minute is important. I know being able to pass in that league is very important. He's improved in both areas. They've kicked him around in his ball screen defense, and he's gotten a lot better there. He's on the all-defensive team. So, he's really making some strides in some areas that I think that will help him there. But he's just got to get with somebody that has a plan for him. Somebody that really wants him, not just taking a flyer on him.
Matt, how would you describe the dynamic between Lance and Braden, not just as
Right.
players, but as people getting to know each other?
Yeah, obviously, with Lance has been a combo for Southern Illinois. He's played the point for him, but he's also probably played more at the 2. you know, for him. So they're great. Braden's he's easy to coach. He's easy to, you know, to get along with. And Lance is the same way. They both have, you know, great personalities. And, you know, but we'll see. You know, we'll see. They definitely, you know, are going to play together at times. And it's really kind of who establishes themselves, you know, defensively, and like on our team in the backcourt, and then who can make open shots among them. It kind of jumps out to me. Obviously, we've just practiced once, so.
What did your team gain in the Europe trip without Zach, and what did Zach gain playing with the Canadian national team?
Well, you know, people don't realize most of the time when you go from high school to college and college to the pros, you start over. You know, and so like now he goes there where he's the best player in college basketball, and then he's playing a couple minutes here, a couple minutes there. And so it's very humbling to kind of get into that world and then not be able to play because there's a competitor you want to play. That's probably a good question for him.
And he's not concussed.
So, but it's also frustrating. But it's like you know, it's one of those things where, you know, you just got to keep working. You got to keep, you know, getting better. You know, with that, what was your other question besides
What
that?
your team gained playing without him in
Yeah,
Europe?
it was, you know, the practices were good. Zach was probably at about 75 to 80% of our practices, so he did practice with us in the summer. But the competition wasn't very good, so sometimes it's a little misleading. The trip was great, so it was my 11th trip. So like you really went from an educational standpoint and a team bonding to get to some cool places like Lake Como and Munich and Vienna, Austria, and you know, Bratislava, Czech Republic. So like we went to some really, really nice places, cool places, but it's during the World Cup and the professional teams aren't set yet. So it's hard to get that quality competition. So that piece of it is really getting hard for teams. That's why you see some groups, some independent contractors are doing stuff like where they're, you know, going to the Bahamas and they're flying in the international teams to the Bahamas. So like you're getting better games at that point. But you know, we've done the trips to Italy, to Spain, to, you know, now this trip where we were at Lake Como for a little bit. We've been to Australia. We went to Taipei, Taiwan, so at the World University Games. So we've had a lot of really, really good trips. Taipei, Taiwan was World University, so that wasn't sightseeing. That was just basketball and stuff. So I like that piece of it. I like coaching a game, scouting a game, doing USA basketball. I enjoy that. You know, there's not a recruit after the game. You don't have to go on a radio show. You don't have to get interviewed. Your piece is not cold. Like, you know, things like that.
How did the European trip influence the first day of practice here today, since you had more time with the guys?
Yeah, not really, because they give us 4 hours a week before we get here. So like we're doing stuff before we actually get to our first day. So all you guys come in this first day, it's not our first day. Like, you know what I mean? And so it's just different. Like we went through some stuff and did a lot of teaching today. We didn't compete as much, but just, you know, I'm big on guys will play much harder when they know what they're doing. Like, and so I just want to make sure like everybody's on the same page, everybody gets it, especially Miles, especially Lance. Even though Lance has been, you know, in college first, this is his 5th year. Your vernacular is different. How you do some things are different, especially offensively. So we really start to pick up here next week. We meet a couple times a week for about a month, 4 to 5 weeks, to where we meet at 6:30 in the morning for about an hour, twice a week, and go through everything. So you guys are welcome to come in and do interviews.
Sure.
You know, 6:30. But like that really kind of gets us all on the same page, for lack of a better term. I think that really helps us because we run a lot of stuff. So you got to give it more time.
What did you see from Miles over the course of the summer?
Confident, you know, very athletic. You know, really need his ability to make threes, but also kind of getting him to be a sprinter and just to kind of showcase that athleticism, getting out in transition more than anything. But he's taken it all in. You know, he's had a, you know, kind of a busy 15 months. You know, he's traveled, you know, abroad 3 different times. You know, played with 2 USA teams, one 3-on-3, one 19 and under. So it was a great accomplishment being on the 19 and under team as a 17-year-old. You know, he turned 18 on our foreign trip, so he really should be a senior in high school. But no, he's going to be a good player.
How much can practicing against Braden help? I'm sorry, practicing against Lance helped Braden take that next step as a player.
Yeah, no question. Like Lance is a very good defensive player, does a good job of getting into the ball, and I think they'll both help each other. I think with that, kind of competitive spirit and going back, back and forth.
You touched on this before, but how do you resist the temptation to change the way you do things when you have had these
Right.
heartbreaking?
Yeah,
NCAA.
it's like going 5-25. Like you should change.
Right.
But like, what gets lost is in the last 2 years we've had the most wins in the history of Purdue basketball. So like you're going to change that. We have to change against a certain team, in my opinion. So like the fast, quick teams that we've gotten beat by, like they haven't been stacked with NBA players, and so like when Duke gets beat by Lehigh in the tournament, CJ McCollum's a max-out player in the NBA. Like you can see, like, oh yeah, they couldn't stop CJ McCollum. Well, the rest of the world can't stop him either. You know what I mean? Like they didn't have a guy like that. Like in my opinion, and that's on me, Purdue's just beating Purdue. Like you're just having high turnover games. Just like take care of the ball and give yourself a chance. So when you go back and you watch your season and you go back and reflect, and then you see like the numbers that are like very, very obvious. It's pretty simple. Like it's not what you're doing sometimes, it's how you're doing it. Just like you just need subtle changes. But to me, it's more of a concentration. We just have to do a better job of concentrating and getting locked in. Because once we give ourselves a chance, like even in the Big Ten tournament, like, we got shots up. So as long as you get shots up, we're such a good offensive rebounding team, we really put them in a bad spot. But that's the way you feel in a knee-jerk response. But and when you start looking at numbers and you start watching tape and you realize, we're going in the right direction.
How do you think Cam and will fit in the rotation, and what did you see from them in Europe in game situations?
Well, they got to earn their way into that rotation, so I think that's what's helped us. Have great team chemistry. It's like those guys know that, you start the new year. And does it help you that you had success in the year before? Sure, without question. But you still got to go and earn it. And a lot of people get lost in things because they don't understand how like a team dynamic works. So for us, obviously, it starts with Zach. I think Braden Smith's ability to pass the basketball and being that quintessential point guard, like you got to have some blocks to build around. Well, Braden kind of makes everybody better. His ability to pass. Obviously, Fletcher had a really good year last year. So, like, it's like our size that we talked about, earlier. Like, who coexists with Zach the best? Not who's the best player, but who coexists because he's not going anywhere, right? But it's also you got to have an ability to play without him. Even though last year he rarely got in foul trouble, if he gets injured, he gets in foul trouble. You got to be able to play. And I think those other guys, it would really enhance their roles. But it's really those guys working towards, being good defensively with him and being good offensively with him. I think that's a real important piece. So like Will, he probably took it more than anybody by Zach coming back, right? From an opportunity standpoint, like that's tough. Cam, there is a log jam there. When you look at Miles Colvin, Cam, Brian Waddell, Ethan Morton, like we have a lot of guys there. So just kind of waiting back as a coach and trying to help each one of those guys, and then trying to see the separation, like who's going to separate from who. They make your job really hard, and they don't separate at all. And obviously we like them all, or they wouldn't be here. So that gets to be tough, but it's also a good problem to have.
Speaking of Brian Waddell, he looks like he changed his body quite a bit from last season.
Yeah, he just never got last year. I threw him in there in every non-conference game to try to get him going. He just never got to where he had the look on his face where he was sure of himself. He wasn't putting himself at risk or anything, but going through his ACL and his surgery, it was more of a football type ones. A lot of basketball ACLs are, when it gets loose, you land wrong, you step wrong. Football, you get locked in between people a lot. And you get down and you turn, your body turns and your knee doesn't. He had that. He was playing one-on-one with one of our guys, and his knee got locked in between the other guy's two knees, and he turned and it stayed put, and it got it really good. So he never really got to that point. It's been hard to play 10 people in a rotation too. Like I don't ever try to get there, but if I like 10 people, then I make a stab at it. I made a stab at it about 3 or 4 times in my career, and I always fail at it, right? But if that 10th guy ends up moving past people because he got a little bit of experience in playing, it's worth it because you just don't know how things unfold. you can only tell them at the beginning of the season where they are at that point. They might be somewhere different 3, 4, 5 games. Usually not, but it's happened. And so he stayed in May, and he's put a lot of time into the weight room, and looks confident. He's passing the look test. But I like what he gives us, because a lot of the things I said that we need to make some improvements on. I think he can defend. I think he's long. He's he's active. He can make an open shot. Very surprising athletically. Like he kind of sneaks up on people.
You said it's not your first day. With that said, does today being the first official practice, does that feel different? Is that exciting?
Not really. I got from your standpoint how it would, but not really. It's just you've done it for a long time, right? Yeah. So this is my 35th year in college, counting playing. So it's like it's what you've always done. And I've been on a team since I was 5. So I played in the 3rd grade league when I was 5.
How do you make sure that they don't look at this season the way we're looking at this season,
Yeah.
which is it doesn't matter until March?
Yeah, that's great. Those are great questions. First of all, you can't let people steal your joy. Like more than anything, like the people that I explained this to them other day. I just said some of what's being said is true, guys. So that's true. I said, but I'm the common denominator. Like last year's game is on you guys. I said, but Arkansas Little Rock's not on you, right? And so Braden Smith wasn't here during St. Peter's. So I can keep going on and on. But we're also not going to have a parade for our wins. You know what I mean? And so just try to keep things in perspective, but also understand that really successful people don't go on Twitter and knock other successful people when they fail. It just doesn't happen. And so I just asked him, did you guys hear Mike Krzyzewski say anything? What about Billy Donovan? What about Jim Boeheim? What about Gene Cady? What about Bob Knight? Did they say anything? No, they didn't. Now, if they say something, let's listen. Because I think they know what they're talking about. So for us, I think it's important, just to keep our focus, but you got to make your hard work fun. If you're sitting there, man, we got to win this and got to win that, and that's like sitting in biology class. I don't know if any of you guys like biology. It's like you're looking up at that clock and the clock's going backwards. You're like, man, you can't let basketball be that, because that's their passion. We've done a really, really good job, our staff has, in finding the right guys who love the game of basketball. I think stuff like that gets thrown out, but I know we have that. And so all those guys had to experience that and go through that. And now the best medicine for that is just to compete and have fun, and not look at it that way.
Right.
Even though once it gets that way, it's that way.
Right.
It's the way it is. Don't argue things that's the way it is. That is more important. There's only one team in the country that's undefeated in non-conference the last 2 years. But at the end of the day, who cares, right? It's not who cares, but, and if I reeled off the teams that we have beaten in those 2 years on a neutral court, West Virginia, Duke, Gonzaga, North Carolina, Villanova, probably missed somebody in there. It's pretty impressive. You're beating some really good teams, but you're not beating them 4 or 5 months later. So even though we beat Texas in a game to go to the Sweet 16, we beat Tennessee in a game to go to the Elite 8. It's what you've done for me lately. That's the business. And we haven't been able to come through. So, but with that being said, man, you can't get them that. You can't let them be that way.
Right.
So I think that's our goal as a staff. That's my goal as a head coach. Is hey man, we got to do our job, but we got to have fun with this. Because if you don't have fun and it becomes a job for you, now you're not going to get your best effort. Now you're not going to get there. So they feel it, and that's our job to, keep them grounded, but also, have a lot of fun with it.
Awesome.